that the sun shines down its power to all the world and makes the wind blow strong as it will. I wonder how gentle rains can fall upon the land, so lovely earth can stay lovely still. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. This is a special edition of, what's it a special edition of? Oh yes, Energy Week with George Harvey and Tom Fennell, who is absent. And I have Sascha Deri here from altE Store. And we're going to be talking about whatever comes to mind.
Probably related to solar, mostly.
Probably related to solar. What is altE Store?
altE, we used to be called Alternative Energy Store.
Mm-hmm.
We were started in 1999.
So this is an ancient origin.
Although there's lots of companies out there that have been around since the 80s, but we got our start in 99, and the belief behind the company was that at that time, more so than now, there were many more myths about solar. One of the biggest myths was you can't do solar; it's not realistic.
Yeah, or if you had more than 5% of the grid getting solar, it would wreck the grid.
Well, this is even before people would even consider that. Before that, oh my goodness, what's going to happen if we have more than 5%? So, and then the cost was much higher back then. You were paying, what, $7, $8 per watt for a solar panel probably back then. Far more expensive. Grid tie was feasible, but very rare at that time. It was mostly off-grid. And so we were a group of guys, three engineers. I'm a physicist and an engineer, electrical engineer, and two other gentlemen. And we saw how in other tech industries, which solar really is,
silicon-based, as a matter of fact, just like computers.
That's true. Just not etched as finely. So we saw an opportunity where the myths could be dispelled. And in high tech, I worked for a number of years in communications and telecom, broadband, and you see a lot of companies that push education for free. They push, let me share the knowledge with you.
Right.
And this is sort of, in the late 90s or the very end of the 90s where the internet's just beginning to blossom, and the concept of sharing knowledge is becoming widespread. And so we thought, let's share as much knowledge as we possibly can for free through the website, educate people, dispel the myths, help to answer their questions. And then at the time in our industry, a lot of the folks that were distributing solar products and selling them were still pushing fax and pencils and faxes and pens and paper. And we thought, well, let's just do it all electronically. We're three young guys. Let's just do it sort of the modern way. And we can reduce the cost and how we do business. And then we can reduce the cost to our end consumer who, if we're going to make a difference in the world, we're going to shape global climate change for the better, then we need to deploy this faster. And deploy it faster is one of education, one of cost.
Right.
Now we're still in that battle.
Yeah, we are very much indeed.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of very important mythology out there that has to be addressed.
Still to be dispelled.
A lot of it. And one of the things that bothers me, and I hear it all the time, I see it in the Wall Street Journal, I see it in places where there are tech people writing, the sun is not always shining. The wind is not always blowing. And therefore...
And the oil's not always going to be there.
Huh?
And Earth may not be around
it'll
be around, but...
But I look at that kind of thing and I say, these are true, but they're absolutely irrelevant.
Yeah.
They have nothing to do with a situation with energy.
That's true.
Solar power comes on at exactly the moment that grid power is greatest, grid demand is greatest. Yeah. And in places in the world, it means that the wholesale price of electricity during the afternoon goes to zero.
Yep.
And southern Italy being an example. And the wind, okay, so the wind is blowing at night, and if you happen to live in the right place, you can get it for free.
Yeah.
And if you happen to have a battery, you can charge your battery.
Great. Right.
And the
Like
company that's giving it to you for free is making money doing that because they buy it for less than nothing.
Yeah. with some incentives, yeah. It comes back to a conversation we were having earlier, which was centralized power, right?
Yes.
And just like one of the things that makes the United States strong is the diversity of people
Yes.
that we have.
Yes. Half the people at the first Thanksgiving were illegal aliens.
That's true. That's true. Yeah. They didn't have even a resident card at that point. That's true. Yeah, the first were the border security guards. Looked a little different back in those days. So
I wonder how many people in this country are not descended from illegal aliens. Almost, if you're Irish, you probably have some. And of course, one of the things about being Irish is that 100% of the U.S. population is Irish one day a year. So
that's true.
I'm sorry, I got you diverted.
That's right. It's kind of like solar. But so the United States, I think one of our biggest strengths is the diversity of people that we have.
Right.
We're sort of a natural filtration, although there's certainly, and I think it sways back and forth where, over time, fear for the need of control and power sometimes causes us to shun people that are different than what some groups look like. And so we're afraid of bringing in a diverse group of people. But if we look at the reality of the situation, the beauty of our country is the diversity of people.
Yes.
And that becomes the strengths and the innovation comes out.
One of the biggest reasons why America's been strong.
Yeah, and you look at so many companies, so many technological developments, so many companies, and even within my industry, the solar industry, so many are run by folks who are first or second generation Americans, and they bring that spirit of innovation that we need to be. That should be our renewable fuel. We need those folks.
Right.
So I use that as a metaphor because I think that's same thing for our power grid. We need a diversity of fuels, of clean fuels, whether it's hydro or solar or wind, to supply power. And if we have that diversity of energies, then
we have a stronger grid.
We have a stronger grid, more resilient if, God forbid, there's a volcano erupts in mid Vermont and darkens the skies.
But the federal government has warned us about solar ejections. Said that we just barely missed one, which could have brought the grid down.
When did that happen? When did they say
that? It was about a year and a half ago.
Okay. Yeah.
I'd have to look. I keep thinking of it as being something that happened 6 months ago, but I know that time goes by.
Time has slipped away.
And it was about the same time that they made announcements that were similar about terrorists. And the times that they were talking about the grid going down were anywhere from a year and a half to 3.5 years.
That's the duration at which the outage would occur?
Yeah.
Wow.
And of course, that doesn't mean that we are all of a sudden brought to a halt for 3.5 years. But it does mean that we would have the only people who would be working, the only people who would have electricity would be the people who have their own.
Yeah.
And Burlington Electric Company, which is 100% renewable, might be able to keep going. It depends upon how their resilience plan has been developed. And if they haven't got one, then maybe they'd have to have rolling blackouts until they can get everything organized, which might take a month, might take a week, might take a day. I don't know. Yeah. But people who have got solar power at their homes, at their businesses, if they're grid tied, I would recommend that people who are grid tied get battery backup.
Yeah, use, I don't know if you've heard the terminology AC coupled. These are systems where you can take a grid tie system. Let's say you were incentivized to do grid tie and you put it on your home. Then you realize, gosh, I really wish I had batteries. Then you can attach basically a battery bank along with another inverter to that system and basically make it so that if the grid goes away, your grid tie inverter will keep on producing power. It'll sort of gets fooled by this alternative off-grid system so that it's being fed power and you have a storage system to provide consistent power even at night for your home.
Right, right. And those systems, of course, the more we've got them in place, I think the better off we are. The more microgrids we've got, the better off we are. And microgrids can support each other so that if one community has a wind-based microgrid and another has solar, then they can support each other during those times. We've got options coming for batteries. We've got other storage. One of the things that I tell people from time to time is, Vermont Yankee, when Vermont Yankee was built, there was another project also built just 20 miles down the river at the same exact time. Do you know what I'm talking about?
No.
The Northfield Mountain power station?
No, I don't know about this.
Pumped storage.
Like pumped water and...
They pump water from the Connecticut River up to the top of a mountain at night when the wholesale price is low, and then they use that to make power during the daytime.
Hydro turbines.
This was built exactly the same time as Vermont Yankee, and the reason is because one of the problems that with centralized power that they don't talk about when they're talking about, well, the sun doesn't always shine, is that centralized power is a really bad match for grid demand.
Yeah.
And so, and on top of everything else, you can't just shut that plant down in the evening and start it up in the morning because the boilers are so big that it takes days for them to get up to temperature. So what they did was they pumped the water and then use it during the daytime when the demand's high. And the output of Vermont Yankee at the time it was built, as I recall, was about 520 megawatts or something like that. The output of the Northfield station was 1,080. So its output was double that of the Vermont Yankee plant.
Really?
Yeah. And you go there and it looks like you're visiting a park because it is a park. And as a matter of fact,
so they store like in a large, essentially a pond.
It's a reservoir. It's a 100 some acre reservoir that's on the top of a mountain, and this is old technology.
And is this still in existence today? It's still
it's still running. And as a matter of fact, as you're driving home to Boxborough, you can go across the river, go down to the center of Hinsdale, head south. Route 63 will take you right through Northfield, Massachusetts. As you come out the other end, a couple of miles south of town, you'll see a solar array on the right. They just put that in. And on the left, you'll see a little sign to what looks like it could be a farm or an orchard or a park or something that says Northfield Station. You can go in there and look at the place. And it's got paths that people can hike on and snowshoe on and cross-country skiing, and it's got picnic tables, and it's got a little museum, and it's got all this stuff.
That's a real downside with renewable energy. It creates a lot of beauty everywhere.
Right. And this thing was there because the match
nuclear power plant needed
the match of nuclear to the grid demand is not always right, any more than the match of solar to grid demand is always right.
So now, of course, you need elevation to take advantage of this. So maybe Indiana wouldn't be well suited, but
they've got other options there.
Right, there's other options that would suit the terrain.
One of the things that they do, for example, is in any place that there's a salt dome, where they've extracted brine.
Is this the pressurizing thing?
They can pressurize air underground.
Yeah. And
I keep wondering how long that's going to happen before one of these things pops like a balloon.
Boom. I mean, that's fantastic. That's a great buffering technology. I always thought, when I lived in Costa Rica, they are almost 100% renewable right now. In fact, I think last year they were all 100% renewable. They were
for a large part of the year.
Yeah, there was hydro,
I think this
wind,
year they've
and a sliver
been like
of solar.
98.7 or something. They're really
high.
very close.
But I always thought how hydro was a perfect complementary technology to solar. Now, hydro has its problems.
Yeah.
It can have its issues.
Mm-hmm.
But a friend was an engineer that was working on a hydro dam project that was nestled far up in the mountains. And so it was high up in the mountains where the water was stored in just sort of like this cup. In a sort of like a crease in the mountainside. Mm-hmm. So it's not those sort of like Chinese or like the Hydro One dams of Canada where it's just massive amounts of acreage.
Right.
But it's this little cup. And then they drilled this tunnel way under the, not really deep, but under the mountains. They went down to a little village. And so they have a gigantic, head for the hydro dam. And so here's something that, environmentally was pretty responsible, had very little impact. And then you think about this can compensate for solar, hydro can be turned up, I think,
fairly quickly under certain circumstances.
So when solar comes down in the afternoon and through the night, you can kind of pick up your hydro plants. And then, for instance, in Costa Rica, they have the dry season. Well, then you get more sun, and so you need less hydro. And then the wet season, it's the opposite. You can use more hydro. So there's a nice balance there. But I think that's really interesting. I wonder if there's a way to come up with some sort of municipal level hydro storage
Well,
systems.
actually, here in Brattleboro, we have a hill that has a reservoir right at the top.
Wow, okay.
And that reservoir right now is empty, or it's mostly empty, because the dam at the reservoir was getting really old.
Yeah.
And it just wasn't worth $250,000 to fix it. And Tom Fennell, who's often on this show, almost always on this show, has said a number of times that he thought it would be worthwhile, since the pipes are already there, to look at the idea of using that for pumped storage for the community.
Yeah, wow.
And
you guys are fortunate.
Well, I don't know whether it would work or not, but it's something that could be looked into. But there's a lot of things like this. Now, for example, my son lives in Kenosha, Wisconsin.
Okay.
And he works for a company that makes big centrifuges, the kinds of things that, the big ones you can barely put on the back of a tractor trailer. They're that big.
Wow.
They, you shut it off, it takes 8 hours to come to a stop, that kind of thing. And he's been having really quite a fun time the last few months, because the city of Kenosha, which has 100,000 people, decided to use his company to provide 3 centrifuges for a new installation at their sewage treatment plant. Now, this is a difficult plant because it is right between a residential neighborhood whose houses are practically right on the plant gates and a public beach on Lake Michigan. Okay, so you got to be clean with this plant. You can't just make smells and toxic dumps and things like that. Well, the way this plant works is the sewage comes in, which is raw sewage from the anything that goes down somebody's toilet, anything that goes down the drain is going to go into this thing. And it goes into a biodigester, and it's digested. That creates methane gas, which provides power for the facility, including power to run the centrifuges. It goes into a centrifuge first, and then with the proper density into the biodigester. Well, the centrifuge needs power, as do the others. There's 3 of them. That comes from the methane that's created in that. Coming out of the biodigester, it goes into a thing called a Pondus reactor, which it's the only Pondus reactor so far in the United States. It's a fairly new invention. And the function of the Pondus reactor, they take the effluent and they mix it with sodium hydroxide and heat it up to 150 degrees. That heat comes from the methane. That breaks down the cell walls of all cells that are in there. It basically kills anything that's in there. But it makes anything inside those cells available.
More organic matter available to be
biodigested. So it goes into another biodigester, which increases the methane generated by 30%. Then from there it goes into, and it goes through a second centrifuge between the Pondus reactor and the second biodigester. And then it goes from that biodigester into a third centrifuge, which brings it to a point where it's basically a cake. So that it's about 30% solid, 70% liquid, and then it goes into a dryer, again powered by the methane.
The same methane produced
and
by
that
the plant.
Takes out almost all the water, and at that point it's put in trucks and shipped to farms where it's used on fields, because it's a Class A EPA approved fertilizer.
Really? Oh,
so
that's neat.
the entire thing is
powered powered by itself.
Powered by itself, with a hope of a little extra electricity to go on the grid. But of course, they can take electricity from the grid if they have to.
Sure.
There is a lot of thought going into what happens if there's too much heat. They have a thing that looks like a little set of cooling towers to get rid of excess heat if it is generated. The heat is used to heat the plant in addition to the process. And the question of, is there electricity to come in, to go out? What happens to any gases that are released? They have to be treated. They're actually scrubbed twice, once with sulfuric acid and once with sodium hydroxide.
Okay.
And so there's no smell
that comes out.
You go into that plant, you don't smell anything.
Wow. And
the plant is clean. There's dust all over the place, but it's a clean plant, and it's very modern looking, and it's run by a small number of people, and everything is computerized, but it will handle the sewage for a city of 100,000 people. And instead of being a drain on the city's financial resources, it actually runs at a profit.
Produces a revenue.
Yeah, and produces a high quality fertilizer for the local fields. Wow. Now, this is where we're going. And if you think about, Vermont has had 16 biodigesters, farm biodigesters, when the first biodigester was put in California.
Huh.
The USDA says we could have 11,000 farm biodigesters. My son tells me that any city with a population of 50,000 or more is big enough for the smallest scale version of the thing in Kenosha. Of course, it could go in any city that's bigger. And most of our population is living in cities or communities of that size.
Yeah.
And when you get right down to it, there's an enormous amount of waste, power, going into processes that can produce power.
Yep.
And that you were talking about hydro facilities being a really good backup for solar. Well, so are biodigesters. And so are a number of other kinds of plants, wood gasification all right, we don't want to cut down our forests for the sake of getting a little gas or something, but let's be honest. I remember an ice storm in New York. When they cleaned up the mess, they had 50,000 tons of wood that they had to get rid of.
Oh, so it would have been a perfect opportunity to...
It stores fairly well.
That's true. That's true.
And you can use it to make power. But what did they do? They figured out a way to dump it in the Great Lakes because they didn't know what else to do with it.
Oh, jeez.
All right? But that kind of thing happens every once in a while.
Yeah.
And we've got other
There's a lot of efficiencies that we can improve upon how we dispose of what would otherwise be waste.
Right. And that's a huge area.
So, I apologize. I've only been to Vermont maybe a half a dozen times.
Wow.
I know. It's beautiful. I grew up in Maine.
You don't ski, do you?
Not much. Cross country, but not downhill.
Well, you can do that in Boxborough.
That's true, yes. Where's flat is best.
You live in Boxborough?
Yes, during the week.
Good for you.
But there's a lot of farms I associate with Vermont. And I wonder, again, I'll go back to Costa Rica. There was, in the last decade, there was just this birth of using biodigesters at farms, particularly people with cattle or with milk cows, and they would collect the manure, put it in there, and they were creating biodigesters. They would produce methane. It was very simplistic systems.
It's a very simple system.
Yeah, just this basically plastic bag, and it would generate heat and
that's what it is.
Methane gas, and they'd pipe it one over to the farm owner's stove.
Yes.
So they could cook with it.
Yes.
It was low pressure gas, but it worked fine.
We had one of those in Green Energy Times.
Oh, really?
Last issue, yeah.
Oh, neat.
And people who were putting in, and you can actually go online and find places that sell kits to do that, and they start at like $500. This is not a huge expense to do. You're not going to get much methane, but
Yeah, and maybe I guess that's the question: is can we do that in a climate here where it's cold part of the year? Certainly
It depends on where you put the digester.
Yeah, maybe how much you have going on. I know
Yeah.
my brother's an organic farmer, and you can go out in the dead of winter and you see his manure piles, and there's steam coming out there.
Steam coming off.
He sticks in a thermometer in there, and you can read like 100 and something degrees
Yes.
Fahrenheit in there.
Yes.
So it's amazing. But getting back to what they were doing in Costa Rica, those same people were taking, the larger farmers. And I'm wondering if you could do that from places like Vermont too. We have enough manure, produces enough heat, enough methane, even in the wintertime, that you can take that methane gas and run it through turbines. Basically run
That's what
turbines.
they're doing.
That's what. Okay, they are doing that.
Mhm.
Great.
You can get better efficiency if you run it through a diesel engine.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Huh.
General Electric has a unit, a subsidiary called Jenbacher, which is in Austria.
Okay.
And they make engines that are gensets that go up to almost 10 megawatts.
Wow.
These things are big.
That's a lot of manure or a lot of crap. I don't know.
Well, these big gensets look like the engine. I mean, it's a V20 engine, and it's huge, and it looks like it has spark plugs, but the reason for that is because you need to give it a little heat to ignite the gas. The gas is not as easy to ignite as diesel fuel, but nevertheless, they're running these things from biodigesters and from wood gasifiers. So they've got and you can there are a lot of. When you're talking about biomass, it's not just a matter of cut down a tree, burn it in the wood stove. It's a broad set of different kinds of resources, and all of them, as a matter of fact, would be good backup for solar power. But the Jenbacher engines, which cost less than $1 a watt. If you just get it the simplest model, if you're willing to go a little over $3 a watt, you can get a setup where you're extracting heat from the waste, and you've got a combined
heating, electric producing.
Exactly. Huh. And at that combined resource, you're running over 90% efficiency.
Oh, really?
So
that makes sense because you're extracting that heat.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah. Huh.
But this is like, you have a 10 megawatt engine, and it's giving you 10 megawatts of power, and you're be getting seven megawatts worth of heat out.
So you're saying there's farms in Vermont that are doing this type?
No, they're not doing that. As far as I know, they're most. I don't know how they're. I don't know what kind of engine. Turbines are not that efficient compared to internal combustion machines, but internal combustion machines can be really bad.
Yeah.
And give you an example. You know that the old thing is, if you're driving a car, you're getting 12% efficiency, right?
The cycle.
Why are you getting 12% efficiency? Because most of the heat goes out the exhaust. And that's, if you could trap that heat going out your exhaust, you'd still have inefficiencies in your differential, in your transmission, friction, the whole thing. But that would be very greatly reduced. The problem is, how do you trap that heat? Where do you put it? Heat bottles are very expensive.
Large rocks.
Actually, they are very often.
Yeah, or bodies of liquid.
I spent some time one day figuring out how big would the solar array be if I were putting up highly efficient thermal solar and using it to heat water in the basement in drums, and just one drum after another getting heated up.
Yeah.
And it would be a lot of drums, but they could fit.
we had a customer who he was building a new home, and he was outfitting with solar electric and solar thermal, and he basically built an underground pool. I mean, it was a gigantic concrete storage and highly insulated. It was out in the front of his house, highly insulated. I don't know how many thousands of gallons of water it stored.
Water is the greatest substance.
Yeah, it's a fantastic thermal.
Absolutely, people have got no idea how great water is. But
he would heat it in the summer, and his solar thermal collectors, of course, work in the winter too, but just not much of summer.
They're not as efficient.
Yeah, but he had hot water in that as a source for heating his home. This big gigantic reservoir underground. and it would heat his home all winter long. And I thought, oh, that's a fantastic idea. That sounds like a really cool idea.
It could be very expensive, though.
I'm sure it must have been expensive. I don't know how he built the structure, if it was out of concrete or how it formed it, or if he did it himself or had a contractor do it. But it probably was more expensive than, for instance, what we're seeing more and more customers do now, which is, you do solar electric with a mini split heat exchanger, and that seems to be one of the lowest cost ways of heating your homes.
And a really good thing that you can do with a mini split, or it's not a mini split anymore, but it's an air source heat pump, is use it to heat the water, for the hot water, in your basement. Because if you do that, one end of it is heating the hot water, and the other end is cold. And if you put that over your sump, you've got a great system, which is on the one hand heating your water, and on the other hand dehumidifying
your basement.
And it's doing it very efficiently in both cases.
That's true. Yeah, that's true.
They actually sell units that are just for that.
Really?
Yeah.
Huh.
Yeah.
I hadn't heard of that. I've seen the heat exchangers that are for, we sell one, but that it's just for domestic water. That's it. And they're particularly efficient, et cetera. But I hadn't seen the ones where they're potentially trying to dehumidify
the stuff
the
they're
basement.
coming up with is really remarkable. It's
remarkable. It's interesting. I think what we're seeing is, like, you give the examples of the waste disposal plants or a basement. Yeah. It's instead of thinking about things in very siloed ways about how can we produce a product that does this, how can we think about a more of a holistic way? How can do this? Reduce your cooling costs here, your heat costs here, your electric costs here.
That's right. And another thing that you could do with that thing in your basement, if you think about it, you could build a big box in the basement. I actually did this, but I didn't use this kind of system. But I built a big box in my basement. It was 4 feet by 8 feet by 6 feet.
Full of rocks?
No.
Oh, okay.
No. And it was cooled by an air conditioner. That had its, I'd fiddled with a thermostat and so forth. And I was able to store about 40 cases of beer in there. Never stored more than 20, to tell you the truth. But I used to make beer a lot.
Oh, neat.
And I would make beer and give it to people. I never drank all that much, but I lived in a funny neighborhood, and people would, I can remember walking into my kitchen, and I had been working upstairs and really not paying attention, didn't hear the phone if it rang, didn't hear the doorbell if it rang, but nobody came by and nobody called. So I walked into my kitchen, and there on my kitchen table was a dozen eggs.
Somebody taking a beer and give me some eggs?
No, they had just left the eggs. And another thing that people did, I used to have my driveway plowed out by people who would just come by, plow out the driveway and drive off, and never even tell me they'd done it. And this is, if we live in that kind of world, we can experience that kind of life.
Yeah.
And honestly, I think we're about that far from it, because solar power, people can share that.
Yep.
What does it cost? How much do you pay the sun?
Yep.
Okay. Let's be real here. You can pay the creator. Does he need your money? She need your money? Whatever.
That's true. Depends on the church you go to. They need more or less.
We've got an opportunity here. Jeremy Rifkin wrote about the Creative Commons and zero marginal costs and so forth. Solar power doesn't cost anything once it's paid off.
Yeah.
Wind power doesn't cost anything once it's paid off. Well, it does, but very, very minor amounts of money. And that's why wind power can be given away free from 9 p.m. till 6 a.m. in some parts of Texas.
Yep.
That's the reason why I think it'll be bigger than that. And you were talking earlier about being in a situation where knowledge is given away for free.
Yep.
And we've actually got to the point of taking that for granted. The idea of having a really good encyclopedia for free, really good, not a newspaper, but the equivalent of a newspaper for free. Yeah. No subscription on these things. And Jeremy Rifkin is saying, well, it's going to happen to electricity. Okay, why not? If it doesn't cost anything to produce the electricity, you can give people electricity as an inducement to get them to do something else that you want them to do.
That's interesting. Yeah, you see that, I mean, in technology like Google, Yahoo, used to be you had to pay for email accounts, right? Way back
Right,
when.
I remember
Now
that.
now the email is free.
Yeah.
You used to have to pay for storage, a hard drive. You want a
Right.
hard drive, you got to pay for that hard drive. Well, now you can get, a couple of gigabytes of storage for free.
I bought a 250 gigabyte hard drive the other day, and it was not that many dollars. I mean,
Yeah.
it was way below $100. And when the first computer I worked with, they used to joke about it, and they were off a little bit, but they used to joke about the memory costing $1 a bit.
Oh, jeez.
It was actually more like 40 cents, I think.
Oh, gosh.
But this was iron discs or iron donuts sewn together by hand. One donut was 1 bit.
Oh, my goodness.
And so 16 kilobytes of memory, which that computer had, cost
16,000 donuts.
no, it was 8 times 16,000.
Oh.
It was 128,000 donuts.
Wow, that's a lot of
So
sewing.
it cost $128,000 for 16 kilobytes of RAM.
Wow.
But the computer cost $1.5 million used. Now, admittedly, that was the second computer ever put into to a liberal arts college in the United States. But nevertheless, the time was real. And a 250 gigabyte hard drive, for crying out loud, that's 2 trillion bits.
Yeah.
We're talking about paying off the national debt with one of these things.
if it was in yesterday's value, yeah.
Yeah, that's right.
Well, it's interesting. What would a world look like if energy was free?
Free. And this is something that I'm glad you asked that question, because that's where I'd love to see us go with this show. What do we see? And what I'm looking at is, well, Jeremy Rifkin is saying...
I'm sorry, another great parallel is telephones, right?
Yeah.
It used to be you had to pay for phone calls, and it used to be pretty expensive.
Yep.
And now of course we still pay a lot for our cell phones, I'd have to argue. But you can do voice over IP, voice over the internet.
Yes.
And it's effectively
It's free. It's free.
Per minute.
That cell phone, this is a cell phone that I bought on my last trip to Kenosha. I had forgotten my cell phone charger. Mm-hmm. And this is one of those really cheap cell phones that is from TracFone. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. The TracFone account costs $20 every third month.
Yep.
Which is very close to nothing. And so I decided, all right, I'll buy a cell phone charger. Well, I discovered that you can't do that for the cheap phone that I had. You could do it for an expensive phone. It would cost half what a cheap phone costs. But they had this thing for sale, marked down 25% to $15. And so I bought it, and it has, it has a camera.
Really inexpensive versus, the bricks they would have in the 80s. It would cost, $1,000, $2,000.
Yeah, $15. Okay, where are we going with this technology? This has got, I don't know how many megabytes of memory in it. It's got a lot of megabytes of memory.
Yeah.
Where are we going with this? This $15 device probably has more computational power than that computer that cost $1.5 million.
It certainly does, yeah.
And used 3 air conditioners to cool it off. But where are we going in the future?
Yeah, so I wonder with power, maybe it's going to be something similar where everybody gets free energy up to so many megawatt hours or kilowatt hours. And okay, if you want to go more than that, you want to draw more, just like, Google says, oh, you want to have a 4 gigabyte storage instead of the free 2? Well, it's a fee of $5 a month. Maybe that's like the stepping stone that we'll see. Where, all right, you want to have more than 500 kilowatt hours of energy per month, then we'll charge you $5 for every additional.
Buy our lithium-ion battery, and you get free power for life. What about that idea?
Yeah, I like that idea even better. Of course, I like it even better when lithium-ion batteries actually last more than a few hundred cycles.
Well, we've talked about the Aqueon battery,
right? The saltwater
battery, which you sell
Yep.
at all. Do you sell other batteries?
We sell a number of traditional batteries besides the Aqueon.
Do you sell
batteries.
Iron Edison's batteries?
We do not sell iron Edison, but we're looking on bringing a version of nickel iron batteries on our store shortly.
All right. This is an old technology.
Yeah, I think that was one of the first battery technologies, wasn't it?
Well, it was one of the first battery technologies to be sold, I think.
Okay.
There are earlier. You know, I saw something. This is amazing. I wish I could remember. I think it's called the Oxford battery. And it was a battery that a guy made in 1830, 1840, somewhere thereabouts.
Okay.
And he had this really ingenious little experiment that he was doing with the battery, where the battery was putting a charge on a ball, a little iron ball.
Okay.
And the iron ball would come to something, and it would hit it and discharge.
Huh.
And then it would be repelled by it, and it would go over to the other one and hit it and discharge. And it was just going back and forth between these two bells.
Huh.
And so you had this thing that was going ding, 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 ding.
The world's most annoying battery?
You can't hear it.
Oh,
It's actually under glass,
Okay.
you know, to protect it from the
It
elements.
was passing a charge back and forth.
Yeah, it was passing this charge battery back and forth, and it was powered by what they call a pile, which was layers of alternating things, paper and copper foil or something like that.
Which is kind of how batteries used to be created, right?
Which was dipped in, I think, liquid sulfur was what they dipped it in. I might be wrong, but it was dipped in, if not that, maybe it was beeswax, but it was dipped in something to protect it. And that thing, that little bell, has been ringing ever since it was built.
You mean it's been going?
The battery keeps going. This is a battery that's been going for.
You're not talking about perpetual motion machines, are you?
No, I'm not.
Okay.
I don't buy perpetual motion machines. They don't work. But this thing was so good at holding a charge, and so good at so efficient in discharging that and keeping that little bell going. That, and admittedly, it's just ding, 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 ding. But and you can't hear it, but it is, you can go online and see pictures of this.
And what's it called again?
I think it's called the Oxford battery or the Oxford bell or something like that.
Check it out.
But it was something that was created really early in the battery. So
wait, are you saying it was able to store its original charge all this time?
Yes. It's a chemical store. It's like an extremely.
Okay, so what happened to that? Why hasn't anybody run off with that?
Why?
I mean, why isn't anybody, Oxford storage?
From the point of view of how well it stores, yeah, this thing is great. From the point of view of how much it stores,
the density is pretty bad.
There's another question.
There's the catch. Dang on it.
We're talking about keeping a pendulum going.
Yeah.
And you've seen the grandfather's clock.
Yeah.
You know that the thing will run, in some cases, some of those clocks that are efficient will run for a month.
Okay.
Well,
and it's back up. Yeah. So I wonder if you probably heard about in some, I can't remember which country it was in Africa, their economy has really now gone to this sort of microcurrency across cell phones. Have you heard about that?
No, I have not.
Where, if you need to buy something, you have, a cell phone very similar to yours.
Yeah.
And you're able to do transactions through your cell phone. It's through, excuse me.
PayPal?
No, excuse me. I think it's actually with a nationalized bank or something like that.
Yeah.
But the transaction has no cost to the users or the person receiving the money, but it becomes a virtual currency, and it's enabled a lot of businesses and people to even remote areas. One, have cell phones. Two, are able to do business. And transact business. And family members who might be in cities are able to provide, they're able to send money to their family members in a remote village.
Yeah.
I wonder if there's a way that you could tie that technology in with, I know there's companies that produce solar charge controllers that allow you to create little micro businesses where you do exactly what you're talking about, where you have a very small solar power plant.
Right.
Maybe it's just for charging cell phones and maybe some light sources. And you charge, your customer base, bring it here, we'll charge you during the day, and you just pay through your cell phone as opposed to paying me money. And my understanding is somehow the person who owns this then slowly pays for the device so they don't have to take out a lot of money to even buy the solar panel system. It's sort of a lease to own cost on the power generator. So I wonder if you could integrate in developing countries, but maybe even anywhere, the idea of paying for something through your phone, very low transactional cost, paying through energy, and really reducing the transactional cost for supplying energy to anybody, anywhere.
Well, you know, another thing too is supplying energy. I've got this little computer. It has 2 gigabytes of RAM. It's got a 32 gigabyte solid state drive. Mm-hmm. It uses, we put a watt meter on it. Mm-hmm. Okay.
Kilowatt hour? Kilowatt meter?
Yeah. Kilowatt meter. And also, and one of my favorite stories about
we sell those, by the way.
Yeah. One of my favorite stories about that was my landlady is really interested in economy, in efficiency, in particularly anything that will use fossil fuels or other resources. Mm. And when she bought the house that I live in, and she lives upstairs from me, she needed to get a refrigerator. Mm. And I said, and she was having a hard time choosing one. She knew about Energy Star. She didn't like Energy Star rating systems because side-by-side refrigerators could use 3 times as much power as a one that has the freezer at the top, and still have a higher rating because they're only compared with side-by-side. You know? So she was having a hard time buying a refrigerator. And I said, well, I've got this little refrigerator. I was moving in. I've got this little refrigerator. I've got to get it out of the house. Why don't I just give it to you? You can plug it in and you can use it while you're looking around. Yeah. It was a GE that my grandmother, see this? My grandmother bought when I was about 3 years old, you know. And it's a smallish refrigerator. And
it's a vertical refrigerator.
It's a vertical, and it's got a little ice box in it.
Okay, yeah.
The ice box freezes everything inside and cools everything outside it. Yeah. And I said, why don't you just use it? And she said, I don't want to use anything that's an energy hog. This thing is going to be terrible. So I said, well, let's just plug it in, take a reading, see what it says.
Yeah.
And she had decided that she would use it for a month and then ditch it and get a better refrigerator. It turned out it was using something like 375 watt hours a day.
Really? Wow. That's impressive. Now, how many cubic feet was that? A couple?
It's not big. It was maybe less than 5 feet tall, but it's, you know, and this thing is, their lesson there is don't do anything unless you know what you're doing.
Yeah, well, but our experience has been traditionally one of the biggest suckers of energy has been refrigerated.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, but not because of the wattage, but just how that it's running continuously throughout the day.
Yes.
Well, cycling off and on through the day.
Cycling off and on.
Yeah,
and
but still 375 watt hours. That's equivalent like it running for maybe an hour.
And we actually ran it one day, and then we ran it the following day, just because we didn't believe it. But that's what really it was. Small. It was extremely efficient.
A woman who does a lot of our videos in our company, Amy Baudet, if you go to our YouTube channel, altE Store YouTube, you'll see we have tons of educational videos.
Okay.
Free, of course, on how to do solar. But she's just now working with her husband on a video for their solar kegerator. So her husband does homebrew. And he's a very detailed guy and very precise and does things in a very magnificently well detailed, conscientious way. And he's created this kegerator. It's basically a small refrigerator, but it's one of those horizontal ones where you lift like this. But he's kind of outfitted it.
Very good design if you want to be efficient.
Highly efficient, exactly, in the first place.
The cold air stays in when you open it instead of pouring all over the floor.
Right, so losing out. Okay, got to heat. Exactly. So he's got that. So he's got 3 spouts on it because inside there he has 3 pressurized containers with his 3 different varieties of beers. And this is up in that we're close to where they ski up in Maine. And Amy had figured out, and she just taken the equipment from altE, that she can run this off of something like a 30-watt solar panel and a small battery and like a 300-watt pure sine wave inverter.
Well, if it's really...
So she's going to do a video on this, hopefully in the next couple of weeks. You can check it out.
If it's really very efficiently insulated, you could probably leave the thing not running except when the sun is shining.
Yeah.
Because you know the beer's going to be okay if it's not going to die because it gets to 48 degrees.
Right.
You know. So yeah, but this thing.
So keep your eyes out for a solar kegerator.
That little machine, which is 6 watts.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
When it's being charged?
While it's being charged, it's 6 watts. While it's just running, it's 5.
Huh.
I plug in my 250 gigawatt hard drive, a gigabyte hard drive into it, and it all of a sudden jumps to 6.5 watts.
Oh, jeez.
This thing is so much more powerful than that machine that I saw in college, which needed 3 air conditioners to cool it.
Yeah.
Where are we going?
Yeah, I was just talking to my parents. They just recently were wanting to buy a new computer, literally 2 days ago. Mm-hmm. And I was encouraging them to go for a laptop. This is what I'm doing at the office too, because inherently the laptops versus a desktop is inherently more efficient.
Much.
And you can half, if not even more, in your case, a whole lot more, the energy consumption.
Yes.
You don't have all those big fans going and cooling going on. Now, of course, if you need to be playing intense video games, you might need a water-cooled tower if you're doing CAD designs and stuff like that.
Right.
But for most of us, the power and the energy consumption that realistically we need to be having is something like that for surfing, for doing word processing. So much stuff is cloud-based. You don't need a whole lot of
power.
Juice going into
That's right. And using. I have used this thing for my regular day-to-day work. It's got a slightly smaller than normal keyboard, but I like it so much. This is an Asus transformer. It's called.
Cool.
You can actually take it with you.
You still get a keyboard.
Yeah, there's a keyboard. It's got a touch screen, so there's a keyboard on the screen if you want to do that. I don't do it much. I got it because it's light. It only weighs 1.25 pounds. Nice. And I like it so much that I got the next larger size, which isn't a transformer. But again, you're talking about the same processor. You're talking about the same amount of memory. You're talking about essentially the same screen. It's probably going to be a very similar. It's the same amount of power. This thing has a built-in lithium-ion battery, and it will run for 11 hours.
Oh goodness! Wow.
So but I'm seeing this as kind of emblematic of where we're going.
Yeah.
And it's a situation where neighbor with solar, maybe a neighbor with some other system. There are many systems, and they can support each other. And distributed power, if you think about it. Distributed power is distributed geographically.
Yep.
So the wind never stops blowing because it's always blowing somewhere. But distributed power is also distributed through technologies.
Yeah.
And we have water, wind, solar, possibly geothermal, biomass, many different kinds of each. I used to say that I knew 5 different ways of getting power from the water without building a dam. And then within 1 week, I heard of 2 more.
Huh.
And how many dams are there that don't have power on them that could? A lot of in Townsend, Vermont, there were 2
mill dams.
There were 2 dams that were put up by the Army Corps of engineers to deal with flood control.
Ah, okay.
Are they going to be taken down? Probably not. Did they have power plants? No. They were just there.
But they could be retrofitted.
And they were retrofitted with a couple of megawatts of electric power.
Wow.
And Vermont has this program called the SPEED program, which those things were built with, and of course we have net metering. And the SPEED program has already replaced half of the power that Vermont used to buy from Vermont Yankee. With renewable sources, wind, solar, biodigesters, hydro, small amount of hydro, not a lot.
Yeah.
But and the stuff is just there, and we're getting to a point where we can get it for free.
Yeah.
And honestly, I think that at that point we're talking about computers, the price is going down. I think we're going to see the price of electricity go to the point where people will literally, when they can get electricity from the sun and it's stored cheaply, they can literally give it away. They're already doing it.
Yeah.
And they will be able to do it more. And Jeremy Rifkin, the economist, says it's going to extend maybe to food.
That would be amazing.
It would be.
That'd be an amazing
Absolutely
world.
amazing. It would be. And I think that we have the potential of that. You know, I've been putting up this stuff at my website.
There's so many things about. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but there's so
Go
many
ahead.
things about human security. What is it? There's some pyramid. I forgot the name of it. Of sort of what you need in life. Like one of the basic things, you need security. You need then food, and then reproduction, and clean living circumstances, stuff like that. So, but it's funny when you can relieve a population of or just a human being of the stress of security, those people become more capable of innovating and creating new things, and curiosity is allowed to bloom. And I think about, nowadays for, many people in the United States, until recently, until the last year or two, part of security was having health care. You didn't have a job for the money sometimes. Yeah, you need that. But you need it because the health care was so expensive, or you might have an illness, and if you didn't have health care, you were going to go bankrupt, quite literally.
Yes.
And so there's that potential of that one human being that could be used to do so many things in their life, for society, for themselves, to feel productive, and they're just worried about healthcare.
Healthcare.
And so, imagine a world that I think is
where people don't worry about that.
You don't worry about the healthcare. You don't worry about the electricity.
food.
You don't worry about food, and you're able to create, and
You're able to
innovate,
create.
and generate new things,
Yeah.
and you push the human race forward.
Yes. One of the things I learned when I took a course in art history is how much people are eating, and how easy it is for them to get the food by looking at the pottery they make and seeing how much decorated it is. Because they don't decorate the pottery that they put rice into or whatever into unless they've got enough rice to put into it. And it's only then that they start decorating things.
Yeah, and that's part of that creativity, that innovation.
That's right. Well, yeah. I think we have to stop. We're at the end of an hour. And this is Sascha Deri, who is the CEO of altE Store, and I will invite anybody to go. It is altE.com.
It's actually altE-store.com.
Store.com.
If you go to altE, it's some Japanese or Korean company. So.
Okay, there you go.
altE-store.com.
That's a good reason not to go to altE.com.
Go there.
Go to altE-store.com and you see all kinds of things for sale.
Lots of, and tons. I mean, if you don't buy anything from us, it's a wonderful place to learn. We have dozens and dozens of videos and hundreds of articles, and a lot of really well-educated, technically savvy salespeople that can help you size a system for off-grid, grid time.
Very important. You have professional advice.
We spend many weeks a year training them.
And their advice is free?
Their advice is free, but don't abuse them because I need them to sell stuff too.
Okay, folks. Have a nice week.
Have a good day.
I want to point out that the sun shines down its power to all the world and makes the wind blow strong as it will. I want to hope gentle rains can fall upon the land so lovely earth can stay lovely still.